My fiancée introduced everyone as the love of her life, except me. I introduced myself to someone who meant it. The first time Olivia called someone else the love of her life, I was holding a tray of champagne flutes at her company's annual gala. Her boss, a silver-haired man named Gerald Whitmore, had just finished a speech about quarterly earnings when Olivia grabbed the microphone. "I have to say something," she announced, her voice amplified across the ballroom. "This man right here, Gerald, he's not just my mentor. He's the love of my life." The room erupted in laughter. Appropriate laughter. Corporate laughter. Gerald's wife smiled from her table. I smiled too, because what else could I do? I was supposed to understand it was hyperbole, professional admiration dressed in affectionate language. But something in my chest tightened anyway. I told myself I was being ridiculous. That was 3 months before our wedding date. 3 months before everything else. The second time happened at her sister's baby shower. Olivia stood in the pastel-decorated living room holding her nephew for the first time, and she looked at her sister Amanda with tears streaming down her face. "This little angel," she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "And you, Amanda, you're the love of my life." The women in the room made those soft, appreciative sounds. I watched from the doorway, still wearing my jacket because no one had offered to take it. Amanda hugged Olivia with one arm, careful of the baby. Their mother beamed. I remained invisible, a fixture rather than a participant. When Olivia handed the baby to me 15 minutes later, she didn't say anything. She just went back to talking about nursery colors with her cousins. I held the infant awkwardly, wondering when I'd become furniture in my own engagement. The third time was at our engagement party, which her parents hosted at their country club. Olivia's childhood best friend, Rebecca, flew in from Portland. When Rebecca walked through the door, Olivia literally squealed and ran across the room. "Rebecca! Oh my God, the love of my life is here!" They embraced for what felt like 5 minutes, while I stood next to the gift table, pretending to arrange boxes that didn't need arranging. When Olivia finally introduced us, she said, "This is David. No qualifier, no affectionate descriptor, just my name, flat and unremarkable." Rebecca shook my hand and said something polite about how happy she was for us. I wondered if she noticed the asymmetry. I wondered if anyone did. That night, lying in bed, I asked Olivia why she called everyone the love of her life except me. She laughed, genuinely confused by my question. "Because you know you are," she said. "I don't need to say it." But she did need to say it to everyone else, apparently. I met Olivia 4 years earlier at a marketing conference in Chicago. I was 28, working for a mid-sized advertising firm, feeling generally optimistic about my future. She was 26, already a rising star at a pharmaceutical company, the kind of woman who commanded attention when she entered a room. Our relationship moved fast. Within 3 months, we were exclusive. Within a year, we were living together in her 2-bedroom condo downtown. Within 2 years, I'd proposed at the same restaurant where we had our first date. Everyone said we were perfect together. Her friends loved how supportive I was. My friends loved how ambitious she was. On paper, we made complete sense. In practice, somewhere along the way, I'd become an accessory to her life, rather than a partner in it. But I didn't realize that yet. I was too busy being grateful that someone like her had chosen someone like me. The fourth time happened at her college roommate's wedding. Olivia was a bridesmaid, which meant I spent most of the reception at a table with strangers while she fulfilled her duties. During the toasts, Olivia took the microphone and talked about meeting Jennifer freshman year, about late-night study sessions and bad decisions and unconditional support. She ended with, "Jen, you've been the love of my life since we were 18 years old." The room awed. Jennifer wiped away tears. I looked down at my chicken dinner and tried to calculate how many times I'd heard that phrase directed at someone who wasn't me. I'd stopped counting. At some point, the repetition had numbed me to it. Or maybe I'd just accepted that this was how Olivia expressed affection to people who mattered. Which meant I must not matter in the same way. Which meant I needed to matter more. Which meant I was failing somehow. The pattern continued. Her personal trainer, "You're the love of my life, Destiny." Her favorite barista, "Marco, love of my life, you always know my order." Her younger brother at his graduation, "The love of my life is getting his degree." Each time, I told myself it didn't mean anything. Each time, the words eroded a little more of whatever foundation we'd built. What bothered me wasn't just the phrase itself. It was the enthusiasm with which she said it, the genuine warmth in her voice, the way her whole face lit up. She never looked at me like that anymore. When she looked at me at all, it was with distracted affection, the kind you'd show a pet you'd had for years. Comfortable, expected, unexciting. I started wondering when exactly I'd transitioned from boyfriend to fixture. At what precise moment had I become something she owned rather than someone she loved? The truth was, Olivia didn't need me for anything except showing up. I was the +1, the date, the fiancé, and photographs. We hadn't had sex in 4 months. We barely talked about anything except logistics, whose turn it was to buy groceries, whether we needed to RSVP to another wedding, what time we needed to leave for her parents' house. She worked 12-hour days and spent evenings on her laptop, responding to emails that apparently couldn't wait until morning. I worked my 9 to 5 and came home to an empty apartment more often than not. When I suggested we needed to reconnect, she'd agree enthusiastically, and then immediately get distracted by her phone. When I tried to plan date nights, she'd cancel because something came up at work. But she never missed drinks with her colleagues. She never skipped brunch with her friends. She had endless energy for everyone except me. I started paying attention to how she talked about me to other people. At dinner parties, she'd introduce me, and then immediately pivot to talking about herself. This is David, my fiancé. So anyway, I just got promoted to senior director, which is crazy because I'm the youngest person at that level. At family gatherings, she'd mention me only in relation to her. David's coming to the Bahamas with me for my birthday trip. Never, we're going to the Bahamas. Always her plans, her life, her everything, with me as an addendum. I existed in her orbit, but I wasn't part of her solar system. I was a moon, barely visible, reflecting whatever light she cast, and I was starting to realize that maybe I'd always been this way to her. Maybe I'd been so dazzled by her brightness that I'd never questioned my own diminishment. The breaking point came 6 weeks before the wedding. We were at her pharmaceutical company's annual charity gala, a black tie event at the Natural History Museum. Olivia looked stunning in a navy gown that probably cost more than my monthly salary. I wore my one good suit, the same one I'd worn to every formal event for the past 3 years. She introduced me to her colleagues in assembly line fashion. This is David. Then she'd turn to them and launch into animated conversations about clinical trials and FDA approvals and marketing strategies. I stood beside her, nodding occasionally, understanding perhaps 30% of what they discussed. At one point, her CEO, a woman named Patricia Holbrook, asked me what I did. Before I could answer, Olivia interrupted. David's in advertising, she said dismissively, already looking past me to wave at someone across the room. Nothing as exciting as what we do. Patricia's eyebrows raised slightly. I felt my face flush. Actually, I started. But Olivia was already moving away, pulling Patricia toward a group near the dinosaur exhibits. I stood alone near a table of hors d'oeuvres, watching my fiancé network with the kind of charm she used to direct at me. A waiter passed with a tray of champagne. I took 2 glasses. Then later, I went to the bar and ordered something stronger. The bartender, a young woman with kind eyes, asked if I was all right. I said yes automatically. She didn't look convinced. Rough night? She asked. I laughed, and it came out bitter. Rough year, I said. She poured my whiskey with extra generosity. Those kinds of nights, she said knowingly. They have a way of showing you what you need to see. I didn't know what she meant then. I found out 2 hours later. I'd gone looking for Olivia to tell her I wanted to leave early. I found her in a corridor near the planetarium, and she wasn't alone. She was with a man I recognized vaguely from earlier introductions. Jonathan something, vice president of something. They weren't doing anything explicitly wrong. They were just standing close, too close. And Olivia was laughing in that particular way she used to laugh with me 4 years ago. Bright and uninhibited and real. The man touched her arm. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in and said something that made him smile. I watched for maybe 30 seconds before I cleared my throat. Olivia turned, and for just a flash, I saw annoyance cross her face before she rearranged it into pleasant surprise. David, there you are. This is Jonathan Reeves, our VP of Operations. Jonathan, my fiancé. Jonathan shook my hand with the kind of firm grip men use to assert dominance. Good to meet you, he said, but his eyes were already back on Olivia. She was still smiling at him, still standing too close. I said we should go. Olivia checked her watch, a delicate gold piece her parents gave her for her last promotion. Already? But we haven't done the silent auction yet. I wanted to leave anyway. She sighed, the kind of sigh that communicated I was being difficult. Okay, fine. Let me just say goodbye to Patricia. She walked away without waiting for my response. Jonathan and I stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then he said, Olivia's really something special, isn't she? I looked at him, at the way he said her name, at the familiarity in his tone. Yeah, I said quietly. She really is. What I didn't say was that I just realized she was special to a lot of people, and I was special to no one. The drive home was silent. Olivia scrolled through her phone, occasionally laughing at something she read. I gripped the steering wheel and stared at the road. When we got to the apartment, she went straight to bed. I stayed up drinking the expensive scotch her father had given me for my birthday, scotch I'd been saving for a special occasion. Tonight felt like an occasion worth marking, though not for celebration. I sat in the dark living room and tried to remember the last time Olivia had called me anything affectionate. Not the love of her life, obviously, but anything. Babe. Honey. Sweetheart. I scrolled through our text messages going back months. My messages were full of I love you and miss you and can't wait to see you. Hers were logistics and confirmations and occasionally a heart emoji, which felt like the bare minimum effort. At 3 a.m, I realized I was getting married to someone who didn't love me, or maybe she did, in whatever capacity she was capable of, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't what I needed. It wasn't what anyone should settle for. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Olivia left before I woke up, leaving a note on the kitchen counter. Early meeting. Don't forget we have dinner at Mom and Dad's tonight. Not love you, not even XO, just a reminder of another obligation. I spent the day in a fog, oscillating between anger and despair. I called my best friend, Lucas, who I hadn't talked to in months because Olivia said he was a bad influence. Dude, Lucas said when I explained everything, you've been trying to tell yourself this was okay for like 2 years now. When are you going to admit it's not? I didn't have an answer. He continued, you know what you need? You need to get out of that apartment. Come meet me for lunch, no excuses. I almost said no. Then I thought about spending another day alone, spiraling, and I said yes. Lucas suggested a small cafe in Logan Square, far enough from my usual territory that I wouldn't run into anyone from Olivia's world. It was a deliberately scruffy place, mismatched furniture and local art on the walls, the kind of spot Olivia would call trying too hard to be authentic. I got there early and ordered coffee that actually tasted like something instead of the expensive but flavorless blend Olivia insisted on buying. I sat at a table near the window and watched people pass by. Real people, not the polished corporate professionals from Olivia's circle, but artists and students and parents with strollers and elderly couples holding hands. I'd forgotten this version of the city existed. I'd been so absorbed in Olivia's world that I'd let go of my own. When Lucas arrived, he took one look at me and said, "You look like hell." I laughed for the first time in weeks. Lucas ordered us sandwiches and didn't say anything while I talked. I told him everything, the love of my life comments, the sexless months, the way I'd become invisible, the scene at the gala. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know you don't have to marry her, right? Like, you can just not do it." The simplicity of that statement hit me. Of course I didn't have to marry her, but everything was planned. The venue was booked, invitations were sent, deposits were non-refundable. My family had already bought plane tickets. Her parents had spent thousands on the rehearsal dinner. "It's too late," I said. Lucas shook his head. "It's never too late to not make the biggest mistake of your life." He said it so matter-of-factly that I almost believed him. Almost. We were still talking when someone approached our table. "Lucas!" A woman's voice, warm and uncertain. Lucas looked up and his face broke into a huge smile. "Sophie, holy shit!" He stood and hugged her. One of those genuine embraces that people who actually care about each other share. When they separated, Lucas turned to me. "David, this is Sophie Nakamura. We worked together at that nonprofit. Remember the one I told you about? Sophie, this is my best friend David." Sophie had dark hair pulled back in a loose bun, bright eyes behind round glasses, and paint stains on her jacket sleeves. She smiled at me, and it was the kind of smile that reached her eyes, that felt genuine rather than performative. "Nice to meet you," she said. "Sorry to interrupt. I just saw Lucas through the window and thought I'd say hi. It's been what, 5 years?" Lucas confirmed and launched into catching up. They'd worked together at a nonprofit after college. She'd moved to New York for art school. She was back in Chicago now, teaching and working on her own pieces. Lucas insisted she join us. She hesitated, glancing at me as if to gauge whether I minded. I didn't. Actually, I found myself hoping she'd stay. There was something calming about her presence, something that felt like fresh air after being in a stuffy room for too long. She sat down, and the conversation flowed easily. She asked what I did, and when I said advertising, she didn't dismiss it the way Olivia had the night before. Instead, she leaned forward with genuine interest. "What kind of advertising? Like campaigns? Creative direction?" I explained my role, and she asked follow-up questions that showed she was actually listening. When I mentioned working on a campaign for a children's literacy nonprofit, her whole face lit up. "That's beautiful," she said. "That kind of work matters." Such a simple statement, but it landed in my chest like something precious. When was the last time someone had said my work mattered? The three of us talked for over an hour. Sophie was funny and thoughtful, the kind of person who listened more than she spoke, but said meaningful things when she did. She told us about teaching art to high school students, about how kids from rough neighborhoods would create these heartbreaking, beautiful pieces. "They have so much to say," she explained, "and sometimes art is the only language they have to say it in." Lucas asked about her own work. She was preparing for a gallery show in 6 weeks, a collection of paintings about displacement and belonging. "It's personal," she admitted. "My family immigrated from Japan when I was 7. I spent my whole childhood trying to belong everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The paintings are about that feeling." I understood that feeling more than she knew, the belonging everywhere and nowhere, the trying to fit into someone else's life until you forgot what your own looked like. Eventually, Lucas excused himself to take a work call outside. Sophie and I sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then she said, "You seem sad." It wasn't a question. I could have deflected. Instead, I said, "I am." She nodded like this made perfect sense. Is it the kind of sad that talking helps, or the kind where you just need to sit with it? I appreciated that she gave me options, that she didn't immediately try to fix something she didn't understand. "Somewhere in between," I admitted. She smiled slightly. Those are the hardest kinds. We talked for another 20 minutes, just the two of us. It wasn't about anything deep. She told me about the terrible apartment she'd just moved into, how the landlord had promised character, but delivered a leaking ceiling and a broken heater. I told her about my own awful first apartment in Chicago, the one with the neighbor who played tuba at 2 a.m. We laughed, and it felt easy, natural, like talking to someone I'd known for years instead of 40 minutes. When Lucas came back, he looked between us with barely concealed amusement. What did I miss? Sophie checked her phone and grimaced. I actually need to go. Class in an hour and I need to pick up supplies. She stood, gathering her bag. Then she looked at me and said something that would change everything. It was really nice meeting you. David, I mean that. The way she said it, with such simple sincerity, made something crack open inside my chest. She wasn't performing. She wasn't saying it because it was polite or expected. She meant it. I could feel the difference. You too, I managed. She smiled, waved to Lucas, and left. I watched her go, this woman I'd just met, this stranger who'd somehow seen me more clearly in an hour than my fiancé had in 4 years. Lucas sat down and immediately said, Okay, so we're definitely not talking about how you looked at her like she hung the moon. I started to protest. He held up a hand. I'm just saying, just observing, no judgment. I went to dinner at Olivia's parents' house that night as planned. Her mother, Catherine, had made her signature beef Wellington and opened a bottle of wine that cost more than my monthly car payment. Her father, Richard, talked about the wedding as if it were a business merger he was particularly proud of orchestrating. You're joining an excellent family, David, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. Olivia's always been destined for great things. It's good she found someone stable to support her ambitions. I smiled and nodded, playing my part. Stable. That's what I was. Not exciting, not passionate, not the love of anyone's life. Just stable. A safe choice, a reasonable decision. Olivia's younger sister Amanda arrived late with her husband and the baby. Olivia immediately monopolized the infant, cooing and taking approximately 1,000 photos. I can't wait until we have one of these, she announced to the table. I almost dropped my wine glass. We'd never discussed children. Not once. She'd always said she was focused on her career, that kids were a distant maybe. Now she was making announcements about our hypothetical family to her parents. After dinner, I helped Catherine clean up in the kitchen while Olivia stayed in the living room with the baby. Catherine loaded the dishwasher in efficient, practiced movements. You're very quiet tonight, David, she observed. Everything all right? I could have said yes. Should have said yes. Instead, I asked, Catherine, does Olivia talk about me much when I'm not around? She looked at me with surprise. Well, she mentions you, of course. You're getting married. That wasn't an answer. I pressed gently. But does she talk about me the way she talks about other people? Does she light up? Does she seem excited? Catherine's face softened into something that might have been pity. She dried her hands carefully before responding. David, Olivia has always been very focused on her career. Even as a child, she knew exactly what she wanted and how to get it. Personal relationships have always been more practical for her. Practical. There was that word again. I was a practical choice. I went home alone that night. Olivia stayed with her family to help with the baby, though we all knew Amanda had things under control. I sat in our apartment, Olivia's apartment, really, that she'd let me move into, and looked around at the space. Nothing in it was mine except some clothes and a few books. The furniture was hers. The art was hers. The dishes, the towels, the coffee maker, all hers. I'd moved into her life and forgot to bring my own. I pulled out my phone and, without overthinking it, texted Lucas. Can you give me Sophie's number? His response came immediately. Fucking finally, yes. Don't fuck this up. Then her number appeared. I stared at it for 10 minutes before typing. Hi, Sophie, this is David from the cafe. I know this is forward, but would you want to get coffee sometime? Just to talk. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Her response came 20 minutes later. I'd like that. Thursday work? Same cafe, 10 a.m.? I confirmed, feeling like I'd just made a decision I couldn't take back. I had. I didn't tell Olivia about meeting Sophie. I told myself it wasn't a lie because we were just having coffee, just talking, nothing inappropriate. But I knew I was rationalizing. If there was nothing wrong with it, I wouldn't have hidden it. When I arrived at the cafe on Thursday, Sophie was already there, sitting at the same table by the window. She had a sketchbook open in front of her, her hand moving in quick, confident strokes. I watched her for a moment before approaching. She was completely absorbed in her work, unaware of everything around her. When I said her name, she looked up and smiled. Hey, perfect timing. I just finished. She turned the sketchbook so I could see. She'd been drawing the cafe interior, capturing the mismatched chairs and the cluster of students in the corner and the old man reading a newspaper by the door. It was beautiful. You're really talented, I said. She shrugged, pleased but embarrassed. It's just practice. We ordered coffee and fell into conversation as easily as we had before. This time, without Lucas as a buffer, The conversation went deeper. She asked why I'd seemed sad the other day. I told her more than I'd planned to. About Olivia, about feeling invisible, about the love of her life comments, and the growing certainty that I was making a mistake. Sophie listened without interrupting, without offering platitudes or easy solutions. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My ex-fiancé used to do something similar. Not the same phrase, but he had this way of making me feel like I was lucky he'd chosen me. Like I should be grateful. It took me 2 years to realize that love isn't supposed to feel like gratitude. It's supposed to feel like partnership." She paused. "I called off the wedding 3 months before. Best decision I ever made." I stared at her. "You called off a wedding?" She nodded. "Hardest thing I've ever done. Everyone was so angry. My parents had already paid for everything. His family thought I was cruel, but staying would have been crueler. To both of us. We talked for 3 hours. About art and ambition and what it means to lose yourself in someone else's expectations. About how hard it is to admit you've made a mistake when everyone thinks you're doing the right thing. About the difference between being loved and being convenient. Sophie had this way of articulating things I'd been feeling but couldn't name. She made me feel less crazy, less dramatic for thinking my relationship wasn't enough. When we finally left the cafe, she walked with me toward the train station. "Can I ask you something?" she said as we stood at the corner. "Why did you text me? Really?" I thought about lying, about saying I just wanted a friend to talk to. Instead, I told the truth. Because when you said it was nice meeting me, I believed you, and I realized I haven't believed anything anyone said to me in a very long time. She looked at me with those bright, perceptive eyes. "I did mean it," she said quietly. "I still do." Something passed between us then, unspoken but undeniable. I started seeing Sophie regularly. Coffee turned into lunch, turned into long walks through the city. We were careful never to do anything that crossed lines. No touching beyond casual, friendly contact, no declarations, no kisses. But we both knew what was happening. We were falling for each other, slowly and inevitably. The way you fall asleep, gradually, then all at once. She showed me her paintings, pieces full of color and motion and emotion that made my chest ache. I told her about campaigns I'd dreamed of creating, but never pitched because Olivia said they were too risky. She made me remember who I'd been before I'd shrunk myself to fit into someone else's life. Meanwhile, Olivia seemed not to notice my absences. When I said I was meeting Lucas, she barely looked up from her laptop. Our wedding was 5 weeks away, then 4, then 3. The invitations were sent. The photographer was booked. Everything was moving forward like a train I couldn't stop. Then Olivia's assistant quit abruptly, and she asked me to come to her office to help her reorganize files. It was a Saturday, and I'd planned to meet Sophie at a gallery opening, but I couldn't say no without raising suspicion. So I went. Olivia's office was on the 15th floor of a gleaming tower downtown, all glass and steel and modern furniture. Her desk was enormous, covered in papers and product samples and 3 different laptops. She set me up at her assistant's desk with instructions to file expense reports chronologically. Thrilling work. She disappeared into back-to-back phone calls. I worked mechanically, my mind elsewhere. Then I found something that made my blood stop. It was an expense report from 3 months ago, a hotel in New York, a 2-night stay. The dates coincided with a conference Olivia had attended. But there were 2 rooms charged to her account. Her room and another. Room 1523. I shouldn't have looked further. I did anyway. I found the conference itinerary in another folder. Olivia's name was listed as a presenter. So was Jonathan Reeves, the VP I'd met at the gala. I pulled out my phone and checked my calendar. 3 months ago, Olivia had been in New York for 3 nights, not 2. She'd told me the conference ran longer than expected. I'd believed her. I started searching through more files, looking for I don't know what. Evidence, confirmation, something to prove I was wrong. Instead, I found email printouts. Most were business-related. But one, tucked in a folder marked personal, was from Jonathan to Olivia, dated 5 months ago. "Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again?" My hands shook as I read. Olivia's printed response. "Soon. David's busy with the wedding planning anyway. He won't notice." David's busy. He won't notice. She was right. I hadn't noticed. How long had this been going on? I stood up too fast, knocked over a cup of pens. Olivia ended her call and looked at me through her office window. "You okay?" she called out. I held up the email. She couldn't see what it was from that distance, but my face must have shown something. She came out of her office, concern shifting to confusion, then recognition, then calculated calm. "What's that?" she asked, already knowing. I gave it to her, watched her read her own words, waited for denial, for explanation, for something. She handed it back. "It was a mistake," she said. "Not, I'm sorry, not I love you, just, it was a mistake." I laughed, and it sounded unhinged. "Which part? Sleeping with him or getting caught?" She had the audacity to look annoyed. "Don't be dramatic. It was just a fling. It didn't mean anything." That phrase. Didn't mean anything. But everything else in her life meant everything. Just not me, never me. How long? I asked. She hesitated. David, can we not do this here? I repeated, louder. How long? She sighed, like I was inconveniencing her. A few months, maybe 6. I don't know. 6 months, half a year of lying, half a year of coming home to me while sleeping with him. I thought about all the late nights she'd blamed on work, the business trips, the weekends she'd said she needed to focus on projects. Did you ever love me? I asked. Or was I always just convenient? She looked at me like I'd asked something absurd. Of course I love you. You're reliable. You're supportive. You make my life easier. Make her life easier. That's what I was. A fucking household appliance. That's not love, I said quietly. She rolled her eyes. Don't be childish. Adult relationships are about partnership, not fairy tales. I chose you because you're stable, because you won't get in the way of my career. That's what matters. I left her office. She called after me, saying we needed to talk, that I was overreacting, that we could work through this. I kept walking, took the elevator down 15 floors, walked out into the bright afternoon, and kept walking. I didn't know where I was going until I was there. Sophie's studio. Lucas had mentioned where it was once. I found the building, a converted factory in Pilsen with paint-splattered windows and industrial doors. I climbed 3 flights of stairs and knocked on the door marked Nakamura. Sophie opened it wearing a paint-stained shirt and jeans, her hair tied back messily. She took one look at my face and said, "Come in." I did. Her studio was chaos in the best way. Canvases everywhere, paint tubes scattered across tables, brushes soaking in jars of murky water. The walls were covered in her work, those beautiful, emotional pieces about belonging and displacement. She cleared space on a paint-splattered couch. We sat. I told her everything. When I finished, Sophie was quiet. Then she said, "What do you want to do?" Not what I should do, not what was practical. What I wanted. I realized no one had asked me that in years. I want to call off the wedding, I admitted, saying it out loud for the first time. But everyone will think I'm crazy. The deposits are non-refundable. My family's already bought tickets. Her parents spent $30,000 on the rehearsal dinner. Sophie took my hand. It was the first real touch between us, and it felt like an electrical current. David, she said, looking at me with those bright, honest eyes, how much would you pay to not marry someone who doesn't love you? I couldn't answer. She continued, because that's what you're doing. You're paying the price either way. Either you lose the deposits or you lose yourself. Which cost is higher? It was so simple, so obvious. Why hadn't I seen it before? I called Olivia from Sophie's studio. She answered immediately. David, where are you? We need to talk about this rationally. I cut her off. The wedding's off. Silence. Then, don't be ridiculous. You're upset. You need time to calm down. I'd never heard my voice sound so steady. I'm not upset. I'm clear. For the first time in years, I'm clear. You don't love me. You never loved me. And I'm done pretending that's okay. She shifted tactics. Think about what you're throwing away. Think about the money, the plans, what everyone will say. I laughed. You're not even going to fight for me. You're just worried about what people will think. Another silence. Then coldly, fine, if that's what you want. But you're making a huge mistake. No one else is going to put up with your mediocrity the way I did. Her mediocrity. That's what she saw. I hung up. Sophie was watching me carefully. You okay? She asked. I nodded. I will be. The next week was hell. I moved my stuff out of Olivia's apartment into Lucas's spare room. She wasn't there when I came. She'd left a note. Take what's yours. Everything else stays. What was mine fit into 4 boxes and 2 suitcases. 4 years, reduced to almost nothing. I called my parents to tell them. My mother cried. My father asked if I was sure. My younger sister said, finally, we were all wondering when you'd wake up. Friends divided predictably. The ones who were really Olivia's friends stopped answering my texts. The ones who were actually mine reached out to check on me. I sent an email to everyone invited to the wedding, keeping it simple. Olivia and I have decided to end our engagement. We apologize for any inconvenience this causes. Olivia sent her own email, framing it as mutual, claiming we'd grown apart. Within days, her friends were spreading a different story. That I'd cheated, that I'd been abusive, that I'd had a breakdown. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter. Narrative did. Sophie took me to her gallery opening the following Thursday. It was small, intimate, in a converted loft space with exposed brick and track lighting. Maybe 40 people attended, mostly artists and students and a few local collectors. Sophie's paintings lined the walls, each more stunning than the last. She'd titled the collection Between Worlds. The pieces captured the feeling of existing in liminal spaces, between cultures, between versions of yourself, between who you were and who you're becoming. I stood in front of one painting for a long time. It showed a figure suspended between 2 landscapes, neither fully in one place nor the other. The colors bled together at the edges, beautiful and chaotic. Sophie came to stand beside me. "What do you think?" she asked. I couldn't find adequate words. "I think you understand something most people don't," I finally said. She smiled. "What's that?" I gestured at the painting. "That being between things isn't weakness, it's possibility." The gallery owner, a sharp-eyed woman named Iris, approached us. "Sophie, I want to introduce you to someone." She gestured to a man in an expensive suit. "This is Martin Ashford. He owns 3 galleries in New York." Martin shook Sophie's hand enthusiastically. "These pieces are remarkable. Have you thought about showing in New York? I'd love to discuss representation." Sophie's face lit up with genuine excitement, the kind I'd only ever seen when Olivia talked about promotions and bonuses. Except Sophie's excitement was about creating something meaningful, not about climbing corporate ladders. Martin handed her his card. They talked about dates and contracts and shipping. I stepped back, giving them space, happy for her success. When Martin left, Sophie turned to me, practically glowing. "Did you hear that? New York!" I hugged her. It felt natural, right? She hugged back, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We went to dinner after the gallery, just the 2 of us, at a Thai place in Sophie's neighborhood. We sat at a tiny table in the back, sharing pad Thai and green curry and spring rolls. The conversation flowed like it always did with her, easy and genuine. She told me about growing up in Tokyo and then struggling to fit in when her family moved to Ohio, about feeling like she was performing 2 different versions of herself, never fully authentic in either culture. I told her about growing up in the suburbs, about my father's expectations that I'd go into business, about choosing advertising as a compromise between creativity and stability. "Do you like it?" she asked. I'd never really considered the question. I did once, I admitted, before I started measuring everything by whether Olivia would be impressed. Sophie reached across the table and took my hand. "You should do work that makes you proud. Not someone else proud. You." Her hand was warm, her grip firm. I didn't want to let go. After dinner, we walked through the neighborhood. It was mid-May, finally warm enough to be outside without a jacket. The streets were busy with people eating at outdoor patios and couples holding hands and groups of friends laughing over shared bottles of wine. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that somewhere else, someone's entire world had just restructured itself. We ended up at a small park with a playground and some benches. We sat on a bench, watching teenagers skateboard under streetlights. Sophie turned to me. "Can I say something that might be too honest?" I told her she could. She took a breath. "I think about you constantly. I know the timing is terrible, and you just got out of a relationship, and the last thing you need is pressure. But I need you to know that when I said meeting you was nice, what I really meant was meeting you felt like finding something I didn't know I was missing." My heart was hammering. "Sophie." She held up a hand. "You don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know." I kissed her, not because I had the right words, but because I didn't. Because words felt inadequate for what I was feeling. She kissed me back, her hand coming up to cup my face, and everything else fell away. The park, the skateboarders, the lingering anxiety about Olivia and the wedding and what everyone thought. None of it mattered. This was real. This was what it was supposed to feel like. When we finally pulled apart, Sophie was smiling. "So," she said, "I'm guessing you think about me too?" I laughed. "Constantly," I confirmed. She leaned her head on my shoulder. We sat like that for a long time, just existing together, no performance required. Eventually, I said, "I have to tell you something." She lifted her head. "When you said it was nice meeting me that first day at the cafe, you became the first person in years to say something kind to me, and actually mean it. That's when I knew I had to get out. Because if a stranger could make me feel more seen in an hour than my fiancé had in 4 years, something was really wrong." Sophie and I started dating officially. Though we took it slow. I was still raw from Olivia, still processing everything. Sophie understood. She didn't push, didn't demand, just let things unfold naturally. We spent hours in her studio while she painted, and I worked on freelance projects I'd been too afraid to pitch when I was with Olivia. She introduced me to her friends, artists and teachers, and people who made things with their hands and hearts. They welcomed me without judgment, without needing to know my credentials or my salary or what I could do for them. It was refreshing. It was healing. Meanwhile, Olivia's smear campaign intensified. Her friends flooded social media with vague posts about betrayal and sociopaths. Someone left a 1-star review on my company's website, claiming I was unprofessional and unethical. Anonymous. Obviously her. I ignored it. What else could I do? I focused on rebuilding my life, piece by piece, decision by decision. 3 weeks after I'd moved out, Olivia texted me. "We need to talk. In person." I showed Sophie. She frowned. "Do you want to see her?" I didn't, but I also felt like I owed her closure. Or maybe I owed myself closure. I agreed to meet at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. Olivia arrived 15 minutes late, looking perfect as always. Tailored suit, expensive bag, flawless makeup. She sat down across from me without ordering anything. "You look terrible," she said as a greeting. I probably did. I hadn't been sleeping well. "What do you want, Olivia?" She leaned forward. "I want you to reconsider. This whole thing has been blown out of proportion. So I made a mistake with Jonathan. People make mistakes. That doesn't mean we throw away 4 years." I stared at her, genuinely baffled. "You cheated on me for 6 months. You dismissed my work. You made me feel invisible. Those aren't mistakes. That's who you are." She waved a hand dismissively. "You're being dramatic. Marriage isn't about passion and feelings. It's about building a life together." I wondered if she'd always thought this way or if success had changed her. "I am building a life," I said. "Just not with you." Her eyes narrowed. "With who? That artist Lucas mentioned? Sophie?" I didn't answer, which was answer enough. Olivia laughed, but it was bitter. "You left me for some struggling painter? That's pathetic, David. What's she going to do, paint you a retirement fund?" The cruelty in her voice was startling. I'd never heard her sound quite like that. "She makes me happy," I said simply. "When was the last time you made me happy, Olivia? When was the last time you even tried?" She stood abruptly. "You're going to regret this. You had stability with me, security, a future. Now what do you have? A woman who can barely pay rent and a career you're mediocre at." That word again. Mediocre. Her favorite weapon. "I'd rather be mediocre and happy than successful and empty," I said. She grabbed her bag. "Good luck with that. You're going to need it." She left. I sat there for another few minutes, processing. That was the woman I'd almost married. That was the life I'd almost chosen. The relief was overwhelming. But Olivia wasn't done. A week later, I got a call from my boss. "David, we need to talk." His voice was serious. I went to his office, confused. He closed the door. "I received a call from Olivia Preston yesterday. She said some concerning things about your behavior, about harassment and stalking." My stomach dropped. "That's not true. None of that's true." He held up a hand. "I believe you, but she was very convincing. She's threatening legal action if we don't fire you. She claims you've been harassing her since the breakup." I couldn't breathe. "I haven't contacted her except when she asked to meet. I have texts proving that." He nodded. "Send them to me, and document everything. This is serious, David. If she's willing to lie about this, she might escalate." I left his office shaking. Olivia was trying to destroy my career because I'd left her. The woman I'd loved, or thought I'd loved, was actively trying to ruin my life. I told Sophie everything. She was furious on my behalf, pacing her studio with unusual agitation. "She can't do this. It's defamation. It's slander." I'd already looked up lawyers. The consultation alone would cost more than I had. Sophie stopped pacing. "My dad's a lawyer, corporate stuff mostly, but he knows people. Let me talk to him." I protested. We'd only been dating a month. I couldn't ask her family for help. She took my face in her hands. "You're not asking. I'm offering. Let me help you." I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone actually support you, to have someone want to help without keeping score. I agreed. Sophie's father, James, was a kind man with Sophie's eyes and a sharp legal mind. He connected me with a colleague who specialized in defamation. The lawyer, Patricia Hahn, reviewed everything, the texts, the emails, the timeline. "You have a strong case if she continues," Patricia said, "but litigation is expensive and time-consuming. Sometimes a strongly worded cease and desist is enough." We sent the letter. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then Olivia's lawyer responded, "Ms. Preston retracts her statements and will cease all contact with Mr. my last name." It was over. Or so I thought. The real twist came a month later. I was at Sophie's studio when Lucas called. "Dude, you need to see this." He sent me a link to a local news article. "Pharmaceutical company VP under investigation for fraud." I clicked it. Jonathan Reeves's face stared back at me from the photo. The article detailed allegations of falsified clinical trial data, of pushing through drug approvals for medications that weren't properly tested. The investigation had been ongoing for months. Several current and former employees had come forward, and buried in the 6th paragraph, sources indicate that Senior Director Olivia Preston may have been aware of the discrepancies, but failed to report them. I called Lucas back. Holy shit. He was already laughing. "Your ex-fiancée was sleeping with a guy who was committing fraud, and she probably knew about it. That's some poetic justice." It was more than that. It was vindication. It was proof that I'd dodged a bullet I hadn't even known was aimed at me. The story exploded over the following weeks. More details emerged. Jonathan Reeves had been manipulating trial data for 3 different medications, prioritizing profits over patient safety. People had been prescribed drugs that hadn't been properly vetted. There were complications, hospitalizations. One death that might be connected. The FDA was investigating. The company's stock plummeted, and Olivia was right in the center of it. She claimed ignorance, but emails surfaced showing she'd been CC'd on communications about the irregularities. She'd signed off on reports. She'd been in meetings where concerns were raised and dismissed. Whether she actively participated in the fraud or just looked the other way to protect her career and her relationship with Jonathan, the result was the same. She was complicit. Her LinkedIn profile disappeared. Her social media went private. The woman who'd called everyone the love of her life had loved nothing except advancement and approval. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt sad. Sad for who she might have been if she'd chosen differently. Sad for the life I'd almost been trapped in. Sophie found me on her couch, staring at nothing. "You okay?" I told her what I was thinking. She sat beside me. "You can feel bad for her and still know you made the right choice. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." She was right. I'd made the right choice. Not just in leaving Olivia, but in choosing Sophie, choosing myself, choosing a life that felt authentic rather than impressive. 3 months after the breakup, I quit my job at the advertising firm. I'd been offered a position at a nonprofit that focused on literacy campaigns, the kind of work I'd always wanted to do. The pay was less, but the purpose was more. Sophie's gallery show in New York was scheduled for September. She asked me to come with her. "It's a big step," she said. "I'm not asking you to move there or anything. Just come for the week. Meet my New York friends. See the show." I didn't hesitate. "I'll be there." Summer passed in a blur of work and art and learning who I was outside of Olivia's shadow. Sophie and I moved into a small apartment in Logan Square, splitting the rent evenly, building a life together rather than me fitting into hers. We cooked dinner together, argued about whose turn it was to do dishes, fell asleep watching terrible movies on her laptop. It was ordinary and perfect, and nothing like the performance I'd lived before. In August, my sister got engaged. At the family dinner to celebrate, my mother pulled me aside. "You seem happy," she said. It wasn't a question. "I am," I confirmed. She hugged me. "I'm sorry I didn't see it before. How unhappy you were with Olivia. We all just assumed because she was successful and beautiful that you'd won the lottery." I laughed. "Turns out the lottery's a scam." She smiled. "And Sophie?" I thought about Sophie, about her paint-stained hands and her honest eyes, and the way she looked at me like I was someone worth seeing. "Sophie's real," I said. "That's all I need." The New York show was incredible. The gallery was in Chelsea, a sleek space with white walls and polished concrete floors. Sophie's paintings looked even more stunning under professional lighting. The opening night drew a real crowd. Collectors, critics, other artists, people who knew quality when they saw it. I watched Sophie talk about her work with such passion and articulation, watched people respond to her pieces with genuine emotion. Martin Ashford introduced her to various important people, all of whom wanted to buy her work or commission new pieces. She was glowing, radiant with success that she'd earned through talent and hard work, not manipulation or politics. At one point, she found me in the crowd and pulled me aside. "Thank you for being here," she said. "Having you here makes this real." I kissed her forehead. I wouldn't be anywhere else. She smiled, that bright, honest smile that had first made me believe someone could actually mean what they said. After the show, we walked through the city, ending up in Central Park at midnight. We sat on a bench near the pond, watching the lights reflect on the water. Sophie leaned against me. "I'm thinking about staying," she said. "In New York, I mean. Martin offered me studio space. There's a teaching position at an art school that might work out. It's a good opportunity." My heart sank, but I understood. "You should take it," I said, meaning it. "This is your moment, your career." She turned to look at me. "What about you?" I'd been thinking about this since the possibility arose. "I'll come with you, if you want me to." She searched my face. "That's a big decision. Your job, your life in Chicago." I took her hand. "My life is wherever you are. Besides, nonprofits exist in New York too. I'll find something." She kissed me then, soft and grateful and full of promise. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I'm sure," I said. And I was. For the first time in years, I was making a choice based on love rather than obligation, based on partnership rather than convenience. We moved to New York in October. I found a position at an education nonprofit in Brooklyn. The work was challenging and meaningful, helping develop literacy programs for underserved communities. Sophie's career took off. Her second show sold out. Galleries competed for her next collection. But success didn't change her. She stayed grounded, generous, real. We lived in a tiny apartment in Prospect Heights with a broken radiator and a bathtub in the kitchen. And it was perfect. We built a life together piece by piece, deliberately and thoughtfully. We learned each other's rhythms and routines. We fought sometimes, but we fought fairly, with respect and love underneath the disagreements. We were partners, equals, two people choosing each other every day, not because it was convenient or impressive, but because it was right. One Saturday morning in December, almost a year after I'd left Olivia, Sophie was making coffee in our ridiculous kitchen when her phone rang. It was her mother, calling with news. Sophie listened, her face shifting through various emotions, then hung up. "That was my mom," she said. "She ran into someone who knows someone who works at that pharmaceutical company. Olivia got fired months ago. She's being sued by the families affected by the fraud. She lost everything." I waited to feel something. Triumph, maybe, or vindication. Instead, I just felt relieved that I wasn't part of that disaster. "That's terrible," I said, and meant it. Sophie came to sit beside me. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd married her?" I thought about it, honestly. Sometimes. But then I remember how invisible I felt, and I'm just grateful I got out. She took my hand. "I'm grateful too." We sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee, watching snow fall outside our window. Spring came. Sophie's third collection was nearly complete. A series about transformation and new beginnings. She'd been working obsessively for weeks, barely sleeping, driven by whatever creative force possessed her when she was in the zone. I brought her dinner in the studio one evening, finding her staring at a canvas covered in blues and golds. "Stuck?" I asked. She shook her head. "Finished." The painting was stunning. It showed two figures walking toward something bright and undefined, their hands clasped, their postures open and forward. "It's us," she said quietly. "It's about finding someone who sees you, really sees you." I looked at the painting, at how she'd captured something intangible and made it visible. "It's beautiful," I said. She turned to me. "You know what I realized while painting this? I spent my whole life feeling displaced, trying to figure out where I belonged. And then I met you, and I realized belonging isn't about a place. It's about a person." I set down the food and pulled her close. "I spent 4 years trying to be enough for someone who'd never think I was. And then I met you, and you made me understand that I was already enough. I just needed someone who could see it." We got married in June, a small ceremony in Prospect Park with 40 people, mostly artists and friends and family who actually cared about us. No expensive venue, no corporate guests, no performance, just 2 people promising to choose each other, witnessed by people who loved them. Sophie wore a simple white dress she'd found at a vintage shop. I wore a suit Lucas helped me pick out. We wrote our own vows. Sophie cried through hers, talking about finding home in me, about how I'd taught her that love could be easy and honest and real. When it was my turn, I told her about the first time we met, about how she'd said meeting me was nice, and I'd believed her. "You were the first person in years to make me feel seen," I said. "And every day since then, you've kept seeing me, you've kept choosing me, you've kept meaning everything you say." My voice cracked. "You're the love of my life. And I mean it." The small crowd laughed and cried. Sophie kissed me before the officiant said we could. "I mean it too," she whispered. We celebrated with pizza and cheap champagne and dancing to a playlist Sophie had spent weeks curating. Lucas gave a best man speech that was mostly jokes about how long it took me to leave Olivia and how obvious it was that Sophie and I were meant for each other. "I watched David disappear for 4 years, he said, getting serious. Watched him shrink and doubt and apologize for taking up space. And then Sophie showed up, and suddenly he was himself again. That's what real love does. It doesn't diminish you. It reveals you." He raised his glass. "To David and Sophie. To finally getting it right." Everyone drank. Sophie's father made a toast about how his daughter had always been determined to create beauty in the world, and how he was glad she'd found someone who appreciated her art and her heart. My mother cried happy tears and told Sophie she was the daughter she'd always wanted. It was chaotic and imperfect, and exactly what we wanted. At the end of the night, Sophie and I walked home through the park, still in our wedding clothes, holding hands like teenagers. "We did it," she said. "We really did it." I pulled her close. "Best decision I ever made." She laughed. "Which part? Leaving Olivia or marrying me?" I pretended to think about it. She shoved me playfully. "Both," I said. "Definitely both." Years passed. Sophie's career flourished. She had shows in galleries across the world, her work featured in museums and private collections. I moved up at the nonprofit, eventually directing our entire literacy program for the Northeast. We bought a small house in Brooklyn with a yard and a studio space for Sophie. We adopted a dog, a scruffy rescue mutt named Pablo, who Sophie swore had an artistic soul. We built a life that was ours, not impressive to anyone else, but perfect for us. We had friends who cared about substance over status. We had work that mattered. We had each other. Sometimes I'd see wedding photos on social media from people in Olivia's circle, perfect staged moments that looked beautiful, but felt empty. I'd think about how close I'd come to having that kind of life, performing happiness instead of feeling it. And I'd look at Sophie, paint in her hair, arguing with me about whose turn it was to walk the dog, and I'd feel overwhelmingly grateful that I'd found the courage to walk away from convenient and choose real instead. I never heard from Olivia again. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned she'd moved to Boston, started over at a smaller company, dated a series of increasingly unsuitable men. Someone said she seemed different, humbled maybe, though I couldn't verify that. I hoped she'd found some peace, some understanding of what she'd lost. Not me, specifically, but the chance at genuine connection, at building something real with another person. I hoped she'd learned that success without authenticity is just a prettier version of emptiness. But mostly, I didn't think about her. My life was too full of present moments to dwell on past mistakes. Sophie used to say that the best revenge is a life well lived. I disagreed. It wasn't revenge at all. It was just life, finally lived honestly, with someone who meant every word they said. On our 5th anniversary, Sophie surprised me with a painting. It was small, intimate, meant only for us. It showed 2 figures on a bench in a park, the moment we'd first kissed, captured in her distinctive style with bold colors and emotional depth. At the bottom, she'd painted words in her careful script. When I said it was nice meeting you, I meant this. I meant everything. I hung it in our bedroom where I could see it every morning. Some days were hard. We struggled with money sometimes. We fought about stupid things like dishes and schedules. We dealt with family drama and work stress and all the ordinary difficulties of life. But underneath everything, we had something solid and true. We had partnership, respect, love that didn't require performance or pretense. When I introduced Sophie to new people, I didn't need to explain what she meant to me with grand declarations or performative affection. It was obvious in how I looked at her, how I listened when she spoke, how I showed up for her every single day. And when she introduced me, she'd smile and say, "This is David, my husband." No need for qualifiers, no love of her life proclamations for everyone except me. Just simple truth, simply stated. And I always believed her. 5 years became 10. We navigated career changes and losses and joys. We traveled to Japan to visit the neighborhood where Sophie was born. We hosted Thanksgiving dinners in our tiny dining room. We weathered my father's death and Sophie's mother's illness. We celebrated Lucas's wedding and my sister's first child. We became the couple other people came to for advice, though we never felt qualified to give it. "How did you know?" friends would ask. "How did you know Sophie was the one?" I'd think about Olivia, about years of feeling unseen, about the moment Sophie said meeting me was nice, and I believed her for the first time in so long. She meant it, I'd say. Everything she said, she meant, and I finally understood that's what love is supposed to feel like. Sophie would add, "And he saw me too, really saw me, not what I could do for him or how I made him look, just me." We'd hold hands across the table, this ordinary gesture that somehow contained everything. That was the secret, if there was one. Love wasn't about grand gestures or impressive partnerships. It was about seeing each other clearly and choosing each other anyway. It was about meaning what you said and saying what you meant. It was about being enough exactly as you were. Sometimes late at night, unable to sleep, I'd think about alternate timelines, the one where I'd married Olivia, where I'd convinced myself that feeling invisible was normal, that love was supposed to be transactional and practical. I'd imagine that version of myself, going through motions, attending corporate events, introducing myself because she never would, slowly disappearing into her ambitions until there was nothing left of me at all. The thought terrified me more than any nightmare. And then I'd hear Sophie breathing beside me, feel her warmth, remember how she'd looked at me this morning and said, "Good morning, love of my life," like it was the most natural thing in the world, like she meant it, because she did. She always did. And I'd understand again what I'd learned that day at the cafe when I'd first texted her. Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away from someone who can't love you and toward someone who already does. Sometimes the bravest choice is the simple one. Sometimes introducing yourself is the first step toward finding someone who actually sees you, someone who means it when they call you the love of their life. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.